A nearly 99% conviction rate for a country of 125 million people is evidence enough that something is not right. No judicial system can in reality be so thorough that 99% of the time they solve the crime that they bring charges to. Two terms I want to start off discussing when it comes to Japan are the broken window theory and the hostage justice system. The United States is not perfect. Police misconduct and brutality cost cities millions of dollars annually and/or lead to the acquittal of people who have served long sentences for crimes they didn't commit. And yet, even with this misconduct, the main difference with many police departments in America versus Japan is that the US police have a much easier time admitting that they have no leads or any clue leading to a crime being solved. And just by looking at the clearance rate in some cities, some departments seem almost indifferent to admitting this fact. But then there's the so-called hostage justice system in Japan. When you have a nation where image means everything to the police, to the point that a department would falsely claim a murder victim to be an escort, all because they didn't want to admit that they ignored the fact she had a stalker before she was murdered, you have a very dangerous situation in one of the safest countries in the world. In the US, laws vary state to state, but usually without any formal charges against you. The longest you can be detained by police is 72 hours. In Japan, without any formal charges, the police can legally hold you for 21 days, leading to situations like that of Iwao Hakamada, who was psychologically tortured by a 20-day interrogation while being detained, which led to him making a forced confession to a murder he didn't commit. This also led to him serving 46 years on death row before being acquitted in 2014, while simultaneously being the longest serving death row inmate. Also, if you're in Japan for extended periods of time, you should be fluent in Japanese, since if you are ever accused of a crime, false or otherwise, most interrogations are simply not available in English, which is one of the most spoken languages on Earth. Anyway, the broken window theory in criminology is pretty simple and self-explanatory. Visible signs of disorder in an urban environment, such as trash everywhere or broken windows, encourages further crime and disorder. Japan is a very clean country for the most part, so much so that they've mostly removed trash cans from public spaces, so that the garbage is not even visible. This was done, by the way, due to the Tokyo subway gas attacks in 1995 to prevent any such toxins in a similar attack from being easily concealed. This attack killed 14 people and injured over 1,000, all without being seen, so you can imagine this caused great paranoia among the Japanese authorities and public. Now, the police in Japan, as well as the justice system in general, have very questionable practices. Although you have a right to silence in Japan, this detention with no charges can make that right irrelevant. For example, the police may come to your house or have you come down to the station for questioning regarding an investigation. However, if you choose to remain silent, which is your right, the police can see this as a sign of guilt, which can lead to your arrest without any formal charges being filed against you. Also, the mechanisms in place for exposing police misconduct appear to be much weaker in Japan, and there are several instances of police in Japan being accused of bullying, which makes sense when you can arrest someone with no charges, and the police can just base this arrest on thinking that you have something to hide. Bullying seems like the least of your worries when confronting law enforcement. But something that I wanted to touch on is the fact that Japan doesn't have a missing persons database. Now, of course, a smaller country by population like the UK experiences about 200,000 on record more cases of missing people per year. But in Japan, a country consistently ranked within the top 10 safest on Earth, and not to mention it's about the size of California with 100 million more people stuffed into it, making it the fourth most densely populated country with a population of over 100 million. How could this nation experience at least 100,000 missing person cases a year? Now, of course, some of these cases can be attributed to the very upsetting prevalence of hikikomori, or young Japanese people completely withdrawn from society, whether this is due to shame or failure in things like school or work, which is one of the most well-known problems in Japan, with people working themselves to death, and hikikomori can lead to johatsu, which are people who purposely vanish from their established lives without a trace. Now, obviously, this happens in many countries, but it seems to be more prevalent in places like Japan and South Korea, where an abnormal amount of pressure is put on the youth and working class. Whereas in America, you could even argue that it's almost a tradition to flunk out of school at some point. If you ever went to college over here, then you know how common it is for the population of a college campus to dramatically drop after the first semester, whether that's due to kids dropping out or failing. Although a huge waste of money, at least the societal pressure doesn't cause most of these people to lose their sense of identity, as I've seen people drop out of university just because they were bored on campus. But there are even businesses in Japan that will help you disappear. However, it was noted in 2015 at least that out of the 82,000 people reported missing, all but 2,000 of them were found by the end of the year. Over 4,000 were found dead, however, but this 82,000 number is not to be trusted, as the Missing Persons Search Support Association in Japan, a non-profit set up likely due to the fact that there is no national missing persons database, argues that this number is just another instance of the authorities lying to look better at their job by under-reporting. They actually put the annual number of missing people several times higher than 100,000, just like the official number of deaths from overwork each year, being officially around 200. Experts put it at over 10,000. And this puts most crime in Japan underground, not just in the sense of an underground economy, but also in the sense that the Japanese government appears to not want the public to know anything about it. Something that most people know about, which I'm sure many people were wondering when I would mention, is the Yakuza, or Gokudo, which means extreme path, although the Japanese police would prefer it if you refer to them as Boryokudan, which just translates to violent groups. Now obviously the Yakuza are not just one big interconnected crime family. For instance, some groups forbid their members from dealing in drugs, while others profit heavily from it. While not as prevalent as we're used to in the West, drugs do exist in Japan and are bought and consumed by some people, just nowhere near as out in the open. As in the past decade, drug charges were the most common charges brought against Yakuza members. Human trafficking is also an issue, as Yakuza in the Philippines have been known to trick girls in impoverished villages into traveling to Japan with promises of good jobs, much like what happens in America, but when they arrive, they usually just end up as sex workers or strippers. As far as crime though, the Yakuza usually engage in fraud targeting elderly people or just simple extortion, but instead of focusing on extorting small businesses, they tend to extort stockholders by buying smaller stocks, which grants them access to meetings with larger corporations, where they can then intimidate other stockholders in a very complex type of extortion called Sakaya, where the company that pays for this extortion gains the privilege of having the Yakuza intimidate others on their behalf, such as intimidating certain people into not speaking at these meetings. They're also involved in lobbying, which is also how many DC politicians stay rich once they retire. They get out of government so they can push agendas for money rather than having to continue pretending that they care what their voters think. This in turn means that many things being pushed by politicians in the US especially are more influenced by these lobbyists than the voters. But it's such a complex issue that these people know will just go over the average American's head, since we're too busy trying to find out who we should blame when a policy causes something we don't agree with. Anyway, I'm not giving the Yakuza their full credit here, as they also provided earthquake relief to areas in need in the aftermath of the most powerful earthquake ever recorded in Japan, which happened back in 2011. But back to the Japanese government. I've always been wary of any country with the royal family, even more so an ancient royal family. The Japanese emperor is the only emperor left in the world, as the others failed to make it into the 21st century due to being overthrown, such as the Austrian, German, and even Chinese emperor. But like most monarchs today, the emperor is essentially a figurehead, with the prime minister running the government, but far from powerless, as the emperor hasn't run the government in most of the last 500 years, but due to his position in society, regarded legally as a god until the end of World War II, his approval is very important, although he is forbidden from making political statements. Now, Japan is about 98 million acres of land in total. About 3 million of that was personally owned by the imperial family, although after 1947, a lot of this was transferred into other government agencies, which essentially operate with the consent of the emperor. What's left to the family includes 17 royal palaces and 4 wildlife reserves. But still today, much about the imperial family remains shrouded in secret. Now, as any true crime viewer will tell you, Japan is also a country full of disturbing mysteries and unsolved murders. And keeping with the trend of deception, if you want to know how many murders truly take place in Japan, you have to do a lot of digging. For some reason, when I tried to find out how many murders occurred in 2022, I got vastly different answers depending on which source I used. One thing that was consistent is that the number of murders and violent crime in general has been increasing at least since 2022, where 2023 officially recorded around 800 murders. 2024 appeared to be closer to 1,000. And this also might not be a surprise to many people, but stalking has been on the rise as well in Japan. But like anything, historical context is important. From 1990 to 2002, the number of crimes committed per year has always been recorded around 2 million. Now, regardless of what the police do and don't hide, there's no doubt that this number has dropped dramatically today. The Yakuza were a much larger issue 30 years ago when their average member wasn't a 50-year-old man as it is today. They peaked at over 150,000 members, while today they number less than 10,000. Sexual assault has always been a problem in Japan, and unfortunately, the number of those happening appears to be rising. Okinawa, home to 14 of America's military bases, making it the highest concentration of bases that we have overseas in one spot, has always had a problem of service members committing crimes in this prefecture, and it has been a hot subject of debate and protest. Sometimes in the past though, the crime statistics in this area have been completely blamed on the US, despite the fact that historically it has also been home to one of the largest Yakuza populations, back when they were still a problem. But make no mistake, the US bases have been a problem there. Japan is a very safe country, probably more so for men than women, but the system is flawed, like most systems. Japan has fallen out of the top 10 for safety in terms of homicide, but I doubt it will go any lower than number 20. I would still encourage people to visit Japan if they haven't. Just make sure you know the customs and understand the law before visiting. A foreign country is no place to break the law and claim ignorance. But as always, thank you guys for watching and supporting. None of this would be possible without you. I've always loved to do my own research, but knowing that you guys are also interested makes it all worthwhile for me. Thank you.